So guys, first of all, thank you so much. And before we start this session, we want to play the national anthem, who all have joined in for this session. So it's a big thing for us, AICPA and NASBA coming up and opening up the center in India. So just for a minute, we'll have the national anthem and then followed up by our event. Team, can you please play that? Thank you so much.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे.
Thank you so much, team, for playing that. That just sets up the momentum of the event. Guys, I'm Sripal Jain. So I'm the co-founder of Simandhar Education. So I'm a qualified chartered accountant and a US CPA. So today I have Colin Conrad, who's the executive vice president of National Association of State Board of Accountancy with us. In absence of Patricia, Colin Conrad would take up this session now, followed up with Kyle and then Joe Massey. I'd highly request the participants to put up the questions in the Q&A window rather than on a Zoom webinar chat. We'll take up all the questions on the Q&A window, and accordingly on time to time, we would unmute some of them and so that you can ask your questions accordingly. Thank you so much for joining in. I can see a lot of participants who are today joined us with us. So I hope that we would live up to the expectations. And thank you so much, AICPA and NASBA, for giving us the opportunity to host. Over to you, Sangeeta, to just give a brief about the profiles, and then Colin could follow.
Hello, everyone. Let me give a short intro about our speakers. So I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our speakers from AICPA and NASBA. And we have Ms. Colin Conrad and Kyle Barrier from NASBA and Joseph Matchlott from AICPA. So I'd also like to welcome the off-camera panelists. From NASBA, we have Thomas G. Kenny, Zaid Good-Owens, Elizabeth Good-Owens, and Alison Harper. And from AICPA, we have Mike Horan and Kevin Gote. I would also like to thank our volunteers and attendees for joining with us for this webcast on earning the US CPA license. Let me give a brief about our speakers. Colin Conrad, she is the Executive Vice President and CEO of NASBA. Next, we have Kyle Barrier. He's been with NASBA since 2009, and he's currently working as the Manager of International Evaluation Services, and he oversees the day-to-day operation of NASBA International Evaluation Services. And we have Mr. Joseph Matchlott with us. He's currently working as Senior Manager, Content Management with the AICPA examination team since 2006. He has 20 years of accounting experience and began his career at PwC. He joined AT&T and World Headquarters at E-Trade Financial and Management position in accounting. As a lead CPA on the AICPA examination team, he has served in various roles, including staff liaison of AUD subcommittee and business owner of simulation development for all sections of the exam. Most recently, Mr. Matchlott was the lead for the practice analysis, a research project designed to document the scope of entry-level practice, as well as a serve to the foundation for the exam's validity and legal defensibility. Our speakers will take over the webinar in some time. Meanwhile, attendees, please put your questions in the Q&A window only. We'll take the questions from there. Kindly don't put any questions in the Zoom chat. I'd also like to thank our volunteers who will be asking questions from time to time. Thank you, speakers, for taking out your time from your busy schedule and giving us the opportunity to host AICPA and NASBA today at Simandhar Education. Now, I'd like our speakers to take over the webinar. Thank you.
Terrific. Kyle, if you could go ahead and share the slides, we'll get started. And first of all, again, I'm Colin Conrad. Patricia Hartman, who was going to be giving this presentation, got sick at the last minute. So I am kind of filling in for her here. So I appreciate your patience with me as I pick up the slides. But what we're going to do, I'm really excited about the opportunity to share information with you today. In the United States, we would say we're going to be hitting you with the fire hose. We're going to be sharing a ton of information to you. And we know that you may not pick it all up the first time, but we're also going to provide resources where you will be able to go and follow up and get more information. So we are excited that we have the ability now to offer the U.S. the ability to take the CPA examination, the US CPA examination in India. So we're happy that you're interested and look forward to working with you. Kyle, could you advance it, please? So here's a brief overview of what we're going to cover. Like I said, it's a lot of information. We're going to talk about the administration of the exam, how it's given, what are some of the requirements, and what's on the examination, very importantly, how to study. It's important that you consider how you're going to go about studying for the examination, and review course providers like Simandhar are those that are there to help you navigate that. We also have a service for experience verification if that's something that you might need. So we'll share some information on that. And the licensing process. And like I said, candidate resources, places you can go to get more information. Next. So what's unusual about the US CPA examination are the parties involved. Can you go back a slide, please? So in the United States, you are licensed as a US CPA at the state level, at the state jurisdiction level. And we have 55 jurisdictions. There's 50 states and then 5 additional territories and districts that have the ability to license CPAs. So involved in our world are the boards of accountancy where you actually get your CPA license. And then we have 3 parties, AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, NASBA, which I represent, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, and Prometric, who you've probably heard of. Those are 3 parties that work together to bring the examination to you and to work with you through the licensure process for the state boards. How this works is AICPA actually writes and scores the examination. So Joe Maslot will be speaking to you today about that. He will talk about the content and skills tested on the examination and their process and how the examination can change. So AICPA plays that very important role. NASBA plays the role on behalf of the state licensing boards that we are the body that has a database of all CPA examination candidates from all of the state boards. And we are kind of the go-between between the state boards and the other parties. So once a state determines that a candidate is eligible to take the examination, they let us know. And then we work with Prometric to make sure they know that the candidate has the authority to schedule. AICPA sends the examination to Prometric for the candidate to take the examination, receives the data back, scores the examination, and then shares the scores with NASBA. So NASBA is the body that works with all of the candidates and with the licensees on behalf of the boards. So if once you take an examination, for most states, NASBA will make that score available to you, and then you would ultimately get information directly from the state board too. So we are on the application side and on the score side. Prometric, who you would know, is an international testing company, and they have test centers in multiple places in India and throughout the world. And that is where you would go to actually take the examination. So you would schedule with them and take the examination at their test centers. So a lot of people involved, but it's worked very well for a number of years. The CPA exam, the US CPA exam, has been computerized since 2004. So we've been doing this for a long time already, computerized. But the US CPA exam has been around for many decades before that. So let's talk briefly about the requirements for the US CPA exam. And it's there are some fundamental rules and requirements, but then there are also nuances from state to state. And that's what makes things a little challenging, but we can help you through that, and your universities and review course providers can help with that too. But we have what we call the 3 E's, or if you add ethics exams in, it's 4 E's. It's easy to remember that way. We have education requirements, and under a US, Kyle Barrier is going to speak about this in a few moments, but under the US education model, you have to have 150 hours of semester hours of education, which includes a bachelor's degree equivalent and an accounting concentration. So Kyle can talk a little bit more about that, but that is the fundamental overarching education requirement. But then different states may have requirements for different coursework, may have different requirements for different numbers of hours of accounting or business, which makes it a little more challenging, but we can help you through that. The examination is easy. It's the US CPA examination. It's uniform, whether it's given in India or in New York or in Japan. It is the same examination. There are different forms of it, but it is the same examination that is given everywhere. And Joe will speak more to that in a bit. And you do, it is a 4-part examination right now. It is an audit, financial accounting and reporting, business environment and concepts, and regulation, which includes tax and law. So it's 4 sections that must be passed. The experience requirement is a minimum of a years of experience with accounting background. And this is where there's a little bit of a difference too from state to state. And this is part of why we provide the experience verification service that we do have, because some states, if you're going to be auditing, you need some additional audit hours. Some states require that a supervising US CPA sign off. Some states require that a CPA sign off. So the rules can vary a little bit there too. And virtually all states require a separate ethics exam to be taken, generally online, open book, but it's an examination that is required to be taken separately from the US CPA exam as an additional requirement to become licensed. And just a reminder that to use the title US CPA, you do need to be licensed to be able to go ahead and use that. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Kyle Barrier and ask him to share some information about NASBA's International Evaluation Services, because I know this type of service is very important to candidates in India. Kyle?
All right, thank you, Colleen. Hi, everyone. It's good to be a part of this with you all. So I'll talk about the NASBA International Evaluation Service. All jurisdictions require an international evaluation report for candidates that have higher education outside of the United States. And that's where we play a role. We'll take that education and equate it to the US equivalents, put it on an easy to read report, and then send that to the jurisdiction. This is a high level overview of our process. So it starts out with you, the candidate, applying for the service, submitting your documents to us, and I'll touch on that in more detail later in this presentation. We check over the documents, make sure they're authentic, we research the credential, and we convert it to the US equivalents. We do a course-by-course international evaluation report. As Colleen was talking about, each jurisdiction has specific education requirements They may have different type of accounting requirements, and our report goes into that detail. We'll look at what type of accounting you completed, what type of business you completed, and put it on that report that's customized to that specific jurisdiction. This slide is a snapshot of all the jurisdictions that we support. So with NIS, we have 52 jurisdictions that accept our evaluation reports. 24 of those jurisdictions have named us as a sole provider. So they send all their international candidates to our service. So let's talk a little bit about the India process. So once you've applied for the International Evaluation Report, you've gone to the NASBA website, you found the NASBA International Evaluation Services, submitted the payment online, and created your user account with NIS. You need to have your official educational documents sent. And we do have slightly different requirements depending on the country. So for India, what we want to see, we want that higher education. So anything above the grade of 12 from the higher secondary. So starting with usually the bachelor level, we would want those annual or semesterly mark sheets from the university. And the reason why we require those for the majority of schools, it's a more detailed document. When we do our course by course evaluation, we have to put the equivalents of the higher education in India into the US system, where in the US system, we use the semester credit. So we have to convert those credits from India to the US semester credit. And sometimes the consolidated transcripts, they may leave out some compulsory courses that affects how we weight and distribute credits. So that's why we have the requirement for anything at the undergraduate level. We want those annual or semesterly mark sheets from the university. We want the degree certificate as well, so we can see that you obtained that degree. I know in India, you get the provisional or passing certificate prior to the actual convocation certificate. And so we do want that convocation certificate. However, we realize the schools, they may not issue that convocation certificate as fast as schools in the US do. So if that passing or provisional certificate is within 2 years from you completing the program, we would accept that as well. And we also may need the syllabus or syllabi for several courses to determine the content, so we're correctly categorizing those courses. Now, we do have a large database here at NASBA from all the evaluations we've done, from syllabus from school to school. So we may have that on record, but we may also reach out to you if we need to obtain it from you to make sure we're doing an accurate report. And if you can get that on the front end and send it in, that's great as well. So let's talk about college versus university. So with autonomous schools, we'll accept those transcripts or the annual mark sheets from that college because it has the authority to issue it. It's considered autonomous. However, colleges that are affiliated, we'll want the university to be signing off and issuing those documents. Now, the convocation certificate should always come from the university. And generally, having the university issue the documents is the best practice. However, if you have a college that's autonomous, they can also issue those mark sheets. And I know all of you are probably wondering, how can I have my documents delivered to NIS? My university, it's hard to get a hold of them, especially in right now dealing with COVID. They may be offline more. Well, we're trying to give multiple options. We don't want to just say it's one way, but there are several options. So you can have the school, the university mail the documents directly to us. You can have the registrar or controller of examinations email the documents as long as we can verify that it's an official email address from the university website. You could receive the documents in an unopened university sealed envelope and forward those to us without opening them. And then finally, we added one more option, and it's called True Copy. It's a third party out of India who will help facilitate that process for you. And they share a secure portal with us once those documents are obtained by them. So True Copy is a newer option that should actually be added to our website very soon, but we're comfortable with allowing students to start using that now if you choose to do that. So that's 4 options for you to get the documents. Hopefully one of those works out for you and you can do that. A couple of supporting documents to help facilitate the process. I know Sripal and his team, they use this cover letter and application checklist. It's very helpful. If you're mailing those documents to us, including this cover letter, it helps us ensure that we're matching everything to your NIS account and that the process goes smoothly. And then we also have the request for academic records. You can find this on the NASBA website, on the NASBA International Evaluation Service requirements page. You can download it from our website, fill it out and submit it to your school and help facilitate that process for having the school send the documents to NASBA. So let's talk about the education requirements. As Colleen mentioned, each board is different with their education. The jurisdictions may require a different number of accounting hours. So if you qualify in one jurisdiction, it may not exactly be the case in a different one if they require, let's say, 36 accounting hours versus 24. And so I just put a few examples. This is not a comprehensive list, but what we see when looking at a jurisdiction's residency requirement, looking at if they require a social security number, and other items, we've found that more applicants are going toward these jurisdictions that have higher education outside the US. For example, I know Washington, they do not have a residency requirement. They do not require a social security number for exam or licensing. They require a US bachelor degree equivalent or higher. And they require 24 semester credits in accounting and 24 semester credits in business. And that requirement is the same for examination as it is in licensing. Pennsylvania has a nuance where for their accounting requirement, they accept finance courses, business law. So you have a higher, candidates may major in finance and not have as many pure accounting courses, but they're having finance courses count toward that accounting requirement. So that's just some of the nuances. You go from board to board, you can see that in their education requirements and their rules. And also a good resource if you want to research board requirements. NASBA does have the Accounting Licensing Library, as we call it, ALL. It's just a tool. You can purchase a subscription. You can do a one-day subscription or you can do a month by month, but you can go into that and you can research requirements for each board. You can actually run a search if you're looking for a specific type of education requirement, maybe something with experience. It really covers a lot of things. So if you're interested in that, I put the link out here and you can check that out. So let's talk about meeting the education requirements. So we talked about the 3 or the 4 E's. The first one is the education. Before you can be approved to take the CPA examination, you have to have a certain amount of academic education. And so with the Indian education system, it is a bit different than the US. We generally have a 4-year full-time bachelor degree. A lot of bachelor degrees in India are a 3-year program. Then that can get you into a possible master degree, maybe a postgraduate diploma. And we do look at all those credentials and we do combinations for India on our international evaluations reports. So looking at, let's say, a 3-year BCom or BBA, if you go on to complete an MBA or an MCom, then generally if it's a 2-year master program, 3-year bachelor program, that's 5 years of higher education, building on each other in a sequential order in the same type subjects. We're consider that equivalent to a US bachelor and master degree as well. If you completed a 1-year postgraduate diploma, that would give you 4 years of higher education. We would consider that equivalent to a US 4-year bachelor degree. So there are a lot of combinations. I know I've worked with Sripal on many scenarios and he advises you guys pretty well. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to help. So chartered accounting, it's something that depending on the organization, we indicate that on our report. And it's something, it's not a, you can't throw just a blanket over it and cover everything. But if you're an Indian CA, there's likely that you have a lot of options to potentially take the CPA exam. So that is something that we consider on our reports. We'll look at it. If you have ICAI, ICWAI, ICSI, I don't want to give blanket coverage for all jurisdictions because we can't do that, but it's something that we consider. And Sripal and his team can help advise you on that as well. So once you finish the international evaluation report process, you've submitted all documents to NIES, we finalize the report, we close your account, we send you the report, or we upload it to your user account so you can view it. We also send it directly to the jurisdiction where you applied. So your next step is to then submit your application to CPA Central if you're applying to a jurisdiction that NASBA assists. There may be a board that processes those applications themselves, such as California or Oregon. But as we call them, CPAs jurisdictions, that's CPA Examination Services. We do service many of the boards, and I believe we are up to now 33 boards with CPAs. So you submit your application, they determine your eligibility. What our report does, it puts it on an easy to read template where that state coordinator or that state board can easily determine, does this applicant have the necessary education to qualify for the CPA exam? So let's say that you are determined eligible to sit for the CPA exam. You would then receive your notice to schedule. And that's where you can work on scheduling your exam with Prometric. That notice to schedule has the information on it, so you can contact Prometric and get that date, location, and time of your exam. And I know this audience will be booking an international test site, and so that will be covered later in the presentation as well.
All right, thanks, Kyle. So going back, this is a very important document. It has kind of scoop to nuts everything you need to know about the CPA exam and the process. It's called the Candidate Bulletin, and this is what it looks like. It's electronic, so you can just pull it up on the internet and page through it and read it. In fact, we require that anybody, before they take the examination, read this document. But it's a very good place to go to understand the process and how things work and the important things that you need to know. So you can get to this, you can just type, CPA exam candidate bulletin, and I'm sure that would take you to it. But you can also, it is housed on NASBA's website, so nasba.org. And it's a great document. If you're thinking about doing this, it's a great document to look at. Also want to share with you, this is a shot of the CPA exam launch page from the NASBA website that, as you can see, there's a lot of words here, but it contains a lot of information, a lot of links to information about how the exam works. There are links to where you can go and take sample examinations. You can learn about what's on the examination through the links. And there's just a lot of great information. So here's where you can get to the candidate bulletin and where you can ultimately, when you're going to apply to states, you can come to this spot and then click through to the information you need for each state. So please, this is a great place for you to spend some time looking at information too. So once Kyle explained that you have to apply to a jurisdiction first, that's kind of where you start. And so once you've applied and you've been approved to be a candidate, then you have to register your NASBA account back through the NASBA website through CPA Central. And it's a single sign-on process that you would work through. And our website will help you understand how to go through and do that. Kyle, if you can go on to the next slide. This is where you're going to come to find out the status of your information. This is when after you take a section, many candidates come here to get their scores. So that's a very important place that when scores are released, candidates come and look for that information too. But I think you'll find that this website and the process to apply and sign on and then come back for information is very, very easy to use. So it looks like we're going to stop here and maybe take some questions. And I'm being new to the process at the last minute. I'm not sure if somebody's going to ask a few questions going through the Q&A, or if I should be picking some out, or how we're going to handle that.
So we have few volunteers who would be taking up the questions, Colin. So I'm just unmuting some of them.
Okay.
Shanti, can you please go ahead?
Yes. Thanks for the information, panelists. Now here the first question. What are the measures AICPA and NASBA are taking to overcome the barriers for the exam, like Prometric system shutdown in between the exams sometimes, and the safety measures during the COVID?
Yeah, actually hold on to that thought, because we're going to have another part of this presentation. We're going to cover some of that information. So let's hold that one for now.
Yeah. We have another question. There is a misconception happening in India that CPA is ticket to US. So it would be great to hear from the panelists about how the CPA helps for the Indian students, and it is not a visa to US.
So yeah, the US CPA, first of all, we want to be very, very clear that a US CPA license is not a valid license to practice public accounting in India. That's the Chartered Accountant license. But we do have a number of multinational companies who want to hire people. The value proposition is they want to have employees who have shown their competency and knowledge with United States accounting standards, audit standards, the tax code. They want to hire people who understand and can work with these multinational companies, and sometimes the firms do too. So it's not auditing, it's not signing off on audits in India. That is the chartered accountants, and we very much respect. It's a very esteemed credential and license in India, and we very much respect that. So this is more for candidates who may want to work for a multinational company or for a US CPA firm doing work with for their US clients. It's just it's a differentiator really that you know everything that comes with being a US CPA.
Yes, thank you for answering.
I'm just unmuting Bhavya there. Bhavya, please go ahead. I think we lost Bhavya there. Kritika, can you go ahead?
Yes, sir. So, ma'am, I have this question. What if we do not apply for license within 3 years of passing the exam? Will my credit lapse? If so, is there a possibility of extension in the timeliness?
Yes. Right now, many of the state boards have said, and when you take an examination at an international test location, there is a requirement that within 3 years of passing your last part that you do get licensed. But I would always encourage candidates to be licensed, because that's how you use the US CPA title. And it proves to your employer and to those that you wish to be employed by that you have continued. We're going to talk about CPE, continuous professional education here later in the conference, in this seminar too, about the need to stay competent. It's not just about passing an examination at a point in time, because that may show your knowledge at that point, but what about a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years later? To be a professional US CPA, you need that continuous education, and that is why it's important to go ahead and get licensed and then maintain the continuous education. So we would always encourage you to do that.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for answering.
I'll just take up some questions in the Q&A window with respect to the evaluation. So one common question which comes up is, what are the documents they need to submit for evaluation?
Okay, I can cover that one. And so I went over that with my slides to some degree. And so we want to be as detailed as possible with the evaluation. And so the documents would be the annual mark sheets or semester-wise mark sheets for each year they obtained. We want the final degree certificate. And there may be a time where we need that syllabi as well. And something new that we've done is we've allowed True Copy to share documents with us. So I hope that takes and eases some of that burden for working with the schools to try to get those documents issued. It's a pretty new thing that we just launched. So if you're having difficulties working with the university to get those documents, True Copy may be a good option for you to try. I know they've got a lot of contacts with the universities. You won't have to courier the documents, across to the US. We share an electronic portal. So I'm really hopeful that that's something that can help out some of the candidates in India.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So I'll just take one last question before we move on. Radhika, I've just unmuted you.
Question is, are there any initiatives being taken by NASBA to ease the evaluation process and the NTS process? Also, is there a turnaround time, that is, do the candidates need to wait for a while before getting an update, or do they need to ask for the update?
So I think she's asking on the turnaround time for the evaluation. How many months it takes to get the evaluation report? I think that's how.
Okay, I can cover that one. We're currently, there's a couple steps of the process. So you have the evaluation report, and then you have the application to the specific jurisdiction. So with the evaluation, you're sending the documents. Once we have obtained the documents and match it with your account, we're looking at around 6 to 7 weeks to finalize the report. And so it's a little bit higher than we've been in the past, and we're working on getting that hopefully down by definitely a few weeks soon. And then right now, matching those documents, it's gone anywhere from a week to a few weeks to get that match. So working on that on the front end, because that's the update that you're talking about. You receive the update once we have acknowledged the document and matched it with the application. At that point, we'll contact you and say, hey, thank you for sending everything. We're starting the evaluation process. Or it looks like we received this document from you, but we still need your University of Mumbai master documents. We only received the undergraduate, or something of that nature. So you will be receiving that update from us, whether it's you have an incomplete file or you have a complete file. There has been a little bit of a lag on the front end right now getting that matched, which is why you may be curious about that update.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next session.
Okay. And what I would say is that what we should do is, other questions that we aren't able to answer during the webcast, I'm sure we can work with Simandhar to make sure that we provide other answers as needed. So let's talk about the administration of the examination. You can see this, this particular lady has a mask on, and that is our reality right now for all of us, isn't it? The Indian candidates and those in the region can take the examination. We made a decision back in the spring oh gosh, when did we announce it? 1st of April, maybe, possibly right around that period, that we were going to start allowing candidates to take the examination in India. And what we did was we said for, they could take it in June, they could take it in shorter periods, because we really, one, we wanted to help out and provide relief, because we know it was becoming difficult, if not impossible, for candidates to leave India to be able to test in the Middle East, which is where most candidates did test. But so it was very important that we did this. And what we've done is we've recently announced that as of the 1st of the year, that the examination, instead of just being in the shorter periods that we did kind of during this pilot phase, and as we were making sure we understood how things work, we did make a decision to go ahead and open up the examination to what we call continuous testing. And I think there's a slide later on the topic too, but let me go ahead and cover it here. That means that somebody applies to take the examination in Mumbai, and they take it, they get their score, they take it in early January, and they get their score in early February. If they didn't happen to pass and they want to retake that section, they don't have to wait anymore. They can reapply through the process and then schedule to retake that exam. If they feel like, that their study, their knowledge is still fresh and they want to go ahead and retake it, then they can. So that's what continuous testing means. It was something very eagerly awaited by all of our candidates, and we're happy to be able to provide that in India and in the other locations that you can see on this screen. So on the left, you see where the test centers are within India. There are eight cities where the test centers are located, but Indian candidates can also test at the locations on the right. Don't forget that. I saw somebody put a question in about, maybe they started their examinations in the United States, but then went back to India. Yeah, sure, you can do that. You don't have to go to the same test center to take each section of the examination. So if you are going to be in London and you want to take the examination there, you can. You see several locations in the EU and the locations in the Middle East too. We did recently, in case you didn't notice, recently announced that candidates can now take the examination in Egypt and in Jordan. Those are new to the list as of the last month or so. So that's terrific, and wanted to make sure you realize that. So let's talk a little bit about Prometric. This is, as I said, where you go to take the examination, and you will schedule through them. And I know we had a question earlier about health and safety at the examinations, but do know that Prometric's website has a ton of great information to you to give you knowledge about what the experience is going to be like at their test center. It is also where you schedule, excuse me. So, and their scheduler is set up in such a way that you can look over a period of time and you can look in areas. So if a test, I believe the capacity is good right now, that if you need to test, that Prometric has made sure that there's a lot of availability of test sites and hours and days, so you can get in and test. Please make sure and look at their site. When you get to the test center, you're going to find things. If you've taken the examination before, maybe in the Middle East, and you haven't finished up, you're going to find the experience somewhat different because of the COVID virus. If you want to go on to the next slide, you're going to find, of course, everybody wearing masks, and the expectation is that you will wear a mask when you test. And everybody, while they're in the test center, has to keep masks on. And I think at first, maybe there was some concern about testing with a mask on, but I believe everything that I've seen on social media, that we're all getting used to wearing these masks, and just make sure and wear one that's very comfortable to you so you can test. But the check-in process has changed. There's limited number of people allowed in the lobby. And there's a very rigorous process that they go to ensure social distancing during check-in. You'll find that some of the measures, the things that have happened in the past, maybe you would have handed somebody your ID. Now you may not hand it to them. You may just show it to them. So things like that will be somewhat different at the test center. But I will say, and Kyle, you can go on to the next slide, that Prometric has taken this very seriously. They have worked with experts. Johns Hopkins University and Hospital here in the United States is one of the premier hospitals giving advice to those in the United States about what are the best practices. And they are complying with all of the World Health Organization and US Centers for Disease Control guidelines. They follow local guidelines. So if a country or a county in the United States or a city has certain requirements, then they follow those. And they're obviously wanting to protect you as candidates, and they want to definitely protect their employees too. So they have taken strict measures, and everything that I know is that things have gone very well in that regard. So I would encourage you, and Kyle, if you want to head on to the next slide, to go to Prometric's website, because there's a lot of virus updates. They will tell you if test centers are closed or if maybe they're operating at reduced capacity. They will tell you, there's a video that shows the process to how to go into the test center, what the check-in process will be like, what it will be like as you're sitting there testing, and then how you exit. So I think it can give you much comfort in seeing that video to help you understand how they're working right now and what the process is. And then lastly, I mentioned this already, so I don't think I really need to cover anything here, but just reminder, continuous testing is coming to India as of the beginning of January. So from henceforward, the plan is to allow for continuous testing in India like we allow in other places too. So we're excited about that. And I think the next slide is questions, and I don't know if there are other questions we want to take at this point. And if so, I would turn it back to our hosts.
I think one question, Colin, they have is the India Center permanent? I think it's a $1 million question currently for Indian students. So
yeah. And here's my answer to that. I noticed there was an answer in the Q&A, and my answer would be slightly different. Is we have decided to allow testing in India on a continuous basis, and there's no end date. So at this point in time, we're very happy for the employers to know and the candidates to know that the CPA examination our plan is to continue to provide the US CPA exam in India on a go-forward basis.
That's an amazing news. Thank you so much, Colin, because that would give a lot of clarity to the people who are watching. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I think we can move to the next session, guys. Who all are putting up Q&As? We are continuously answering. So a lot of them from my team are already answering there. So please don't put up in the Zoom chat. I request you again to put up in the Q&A window only. So my team is continuously answering that, and we have NASBA and AICPA also replying to those questions. I appreciate it.
Terrific. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Joe Maslot, who was introduced at the top of the webcast, to talk about the examination itself and the content involved. So Joe?
Thanks, Colleen. And thanks, Kyle, for flipping the slides for me. So I am Joe Maslot. I work for the AICPA. We develop and score the examination. I'll give you an overview of the basics of what we test, from the skill levels to the content. I actually have one of our sample items to share with you and how our blueprint relates to that item. And we'll give you some websites to visit that are really great as you prepare and learn more about the CPA. So exam basics, Colleen mentioned this at the front of the presentation. 4 sections: auditing and attestation, business environment and concepts, financial accounting and reporting, and regulation, which covers law and taxation. So 4 exam sections, 4 hours each. You have 18 months to pass all sections. You need a 75 or higher on each section to receive a passing score. When you sit down in the Prometric Center to take the exam, you'll see 5 testlets. These 5 testlets, you'll see 2 testlets of multiple choice questions, and then 3 testlets of task-based simulations or case studies. I'll show you an example of a task-based simulation in a few slides. About halfway through the exam, there's a chance for a 15-minute break where your 4 hours of testing it stops. You get a break. You can always walk away from the computer without taking a break or pausing it, but that will count against your 4 hours. So about halfway through, after the first testlet of task-based simulations, you have a chance for a 15-minute break. You can forego that break or pass on the break and keep testing if you like, but that 15 minutes is there for you. Next slide, Kyle. So the exam tests higher order skills. And when I mention higher order skills, what we mean by that: critical thinking, analytical ability, problem solving, of course, skepticism, thinking about the sufficiency of evidence that you have working through questions and as you look toward working toward the right answer. And we also test effective communication. And I'll show you how those relate to the blueprints coming up. So the skill levels that we mentioned are those higher order skills are analysis and evaluation. And the basic skill levels you can see at the bottom of the pyramid here: remembering and understanding and application, and they build upon each other. What's good to know about the skill levels and how they relate to the blueprint: all of our content in the blueprint, and I'll show you examples of the blueprint coming up, all of the content is tagged to a skill level. And that's useful for a candidate for a few different reasons. I like to talk about 2 specific reasons. One, you can kind of estimate what sort of question you'll see on the exam. So if you see a check mark in application or remember and understanding, chances are you're going to receive a multiple choice question. We all know what a multiple choice question is. It's a stem or a sentence or 2 followed by one of 4 choices. At the analysis and the evaluation skill level, you'll likely receive a task-based simulation or a small case study. These skill levels at analysis and evaluation, tested by those task-based simulations, do a deeper dive into the associated content. I'll show you some examples of an evaluation level task statement and the associated item, the task-based simulation or case study that goes with it coming up. So what does the exam test? Where can you find that? You can find that in our exam blueprints. These are on our website. You can see from the bottom left-hand side of your slide. aicpa.org/exam blueprints. The blueprints do a few different things. It has the content, organization, and weighting. I'll provide an overview of all of the sections coming up. It has that skill level, the skill allocation and weighting. I'll show you an example of the representative tasks. The representative tasks are a function of the content and the skill level that we test at. And it's a plain description of what a candidate needs to know and do for a particular content area. And then at the back of each section's blueprints, we have the references for all the applicable content. I'll go over auditing and attestation first. If I failed to mention, the blueprints are publicly available. You can go down and download them or print them, and they are on our website. And I just want to make sure that folks realize that they are free and available and out there for all candidates. So I mentioned the 5 testlet structure. So there's 72 multiple choice questions and 8 task-based simulations. So you'll see about 36 multiple choice questions in your first testlet. Second testlet, you'll see the other 36 multiple choice questions or so. Then you'll have 3 testlets covering 8 task-based simulations. I'll show you an example of task-based simulations coming up, but audit covers 4 main areas, and you can see here the allocation on the right-hand side of the score. And the audit section follows the structure of an engagement. So up front, you always, of course, front of mind are ethics, professional responsibilities, and general principles. Then you get into planning and developing risk assessment, moving into performing substantive procedures and obtaining evidence, and then rounding out by your conclusions and reporting. You can see the skill levels below. And of course, when you go to the blueprint, those would correspond to the check marks. So we have an example here of the blueprints. Again, these are publicly available. You can go out and download them. We are in audit and attestation area 3. So the performing procedures and obtaining evidence. You can see we're going to talk about a task statement here that's in specific matters that require special consideration, and that's inventory and inventory held by others. And you can see from the task statement, this is actually an evaluation check mark. Observe the performance of inventory counting procedures, inspect the inventory, and perform test counts to verify ending inventory quantities. So if you saw a check mark in analysis or evaluation, as you prepare for study, you would have to make sure that you're able to do a bit of a deeper dive on this. And by that, I mean, next slide has an example of what one of our task-based simulations look like. So it might be a little difficult to see, but that's okay. You can go out to our sample test, download, and work through this item. Our sample test has examples of all sorts of our item types, both multiple choice questions and task-based simulations. I'll give you a brief overview here on how a simulation would work. So if your eyes go to the top of the screen, you'll see some of the resources. You have a calculator, you have Excel available, you have authoritative literature. So you could go to the US auditing standards and look up whatever you like. It's sort of like an open book test, as we call it in the United States. You have your sources with you. You also have a help screen. You can see from on the left-hand side is where we're asking you to do your work, and the right-hand side of the screen has all of the exhibits open. You can open and close those exhibits as you see fit. You can drag them, close them, move them, close them all, open them all as you work through your questions. If your eyes go to the bottom left of the screen, you can see cells B2 and C2 are asking for inputs. And that's really where you put your responses. Cell B2 is looking for a dollar amount. Cell C2 is looking for a justification, and that's actually a drop-down list. So you double-click in the cell and select from the list an appropriate response. As you go through task-based simulations or any item that has instructions, make sure you pay attention to the instructions. We spend a lot of time and effort making sure that they're as clear as possible, and they'll give you the necessary instructions to complete your item successfully. You can see here that this was a task-based simulation focusing on inventory, and really what they're asking you to do is, for a specific product line in the bottom left-hand corner, observe the documents, review the documents, and determine if any adjustment is needed to the inventory balance, and then of course that associated justification. So there's probably 6 to 8 questions you have to answer here. That's usually the size of a case study or task-based simulation. Again, these are free on our website to go through, and they'll give you examples from all 4 of our sections. I'll walk through the other 3 sections and their structure. Each section has a little bit different construction. Business environment and concepts, BEC, is really the building blocks of the knowledge that you need when performing core services of a CPA. The core services, of course, are tested in auditing and attestation, financial accounting and reporting, and regulation, which is largely taxation. So these are those foundational concepts, and you can see the content areas listed on the left-hand side here, and they cover corporate governance, economics, financial and operations management, and IT. Those are all pervasive concepts that relate to the other 3 sections. BEC is a little different because the last testlet that you'll see is written communication. And that is basically a word processor where you'll type out a response to an accounting question. What we're focusing on here are business communications. So making sure that you appropriately answer the business question in a professional format is what we're looking for. And BEC also does have 4 task-based simulations, which look and feel similar to the example that I gave before, but focusing, of course, on the content areas here. Financial accounting and reporting has the same amount of task-based simulations as the audit section. So you'll see 3 testlets of task-based simulations. You can see the areas here are bookended by the conceptual framework, standard setting financial reporting, and then state and local governments. Those are kind of tested most, if you look at the blueprints, at the most basic skill levels. Where we really get into higher order skills are the middle 2 areas, financial statement accounts and select transactions. You can see from the allocation, that's where a bulk of your weight comes from. Those sections also have a lot of the higher order skills. So going to the blueprint, making sure you can do a deep dive on those select accounts or transactions will become really important when you take the FAR section, especially the task-based simulations or case studies. As Colleen mentioned, regulation, REG, as we call it, focuses on law and taxation. The taxation component covers the US federal taxation of property, individuals, and entities. We start off the reg section with focusing on professional responsibilities, ethics, and federal tax procedures. And in the mix here, you can see business law. Reg actually has the most amount of task-based simulations. Of multiple choice questions, same amount of task-based simulations. So you'll see 8 task-based simulations over the 3 testlets. You can see the first 2 areas, ethics, business law, are tested probably more at the basic skill levels. The higher order skills are in areas 3 through 5. Really the federal taxation of property, individuals, entities on areas 3 through 5 are absolutely critical. We have some changes coming to the exam. We just published the new exam blueprints. They are effective for testing July 1st, 2021. The changes are a result of a study we did in 2019. The focus of the study was to determine the impact of technology on newly licensed CPA practice. The highlights of those changes you can see at the bottom of your screen. In audit and BEC, there's increased emphasis on understanding business processes, having a digital and data-driven mindset, including data analytics, and focus on service organization controls, SOC reports. You'll see here, and I saw in the chat about IFRS, because of the lack of convergence between IFRS and US GAAP, we will no longer be testing those differences. We don't see a time in the future where they're going to converge. Convergence largely failed. So there's probably not in the near future going to be overlap of those two. So we're removing the testing of IFRS from the section. And the rest of states made state tax returns, the exemption is so large that a lot of newly licensed CPAs would never encounter estate taxation. Now, we monitor the exam, of course, and pronouncement changes, and that's done on a yearly basis. So we will always update folks with at least 6 months notice of any content changes for the exam. Importance of an exam strategy. So as you go through this process, having the end goal in mind is absolutely critical. Learning a really good first step. So going to, oh, I hear I'm breaking up. Hold on for a sec. Okay. I hope you can hear me better now.
Sound good, Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, I had a little disturbance in my connection. So, importance of an exam strategy. I think that can really, candidates entering the CPA exam world, focus on the blueprints, making sure you really can address those higher skill level tasks. That's where you'll be asked to do deep dives or provide more responses on those content. So you go to the blueprints, learn about that, take our sample test, get a feel for the items. Also, sharing your journey with close friends and families can help. It's a big endeavor to take the exam. 16 hours worth of exams is a lot. So you can really, I would strongly suggest checking out our blueprints and going to the sample tests as first steps. Questions?
Okay. So I'm just unmuting Abhi there. Abhi, please go ahead.
Hello, Joe.
Hello.
So my question is that there is a propaganda going in India that there is one more section adding to the CPA curriculum, and it's going to be 5 sections to pass CPA from 2024. And how far is it, like, right?
That is true. We're exploring, it's called CPA Evolution. You can actually Google CPA Evolution and see the latest on that process. And it will actually, the current goal is to remain 4 sections, but you would focus on a common core of exams and then select one discipline to show deeper knowledge. So actually the model is meant to be a little bit more flexible for those choosing a specific path. So if you're going the technology route, there's a route for that. If you're going financial accounting, there's a specialty in that. And if you're going taxation, there's a specialty in that. So it's meant to be a little bit more flexible and acknowledge the differences in the profession. But we are trying to keep that currently as 4 sections.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarity.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I've unmuted Shanti. Shanti, please go ahead.
Yes, there is a popular question from the students that does AICPA have a mock exam? If yes, do the candidates require NTS to appear for that?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
So he's looking for the mock test. So do AICPA have the mock test?
Yes, we have a practice test out there. The example that I showed in a few slides ago is actually from that sample test. And the sample test has both multiple choice questions, our case studies, and is broken out by each section and ties directly to our blueprints. So if you Google AICPA CPA exam sample test, you'll be able to get there.
Okay. And what is the uniform CPA exam and how the written communications are evaluated?
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that one.
Okay. What is the uniform CPA exam and how the written communications are evaluated? Because
I'm not
as
sure
we
I understand that question.
So the
Joe,
question,
she's asking about how written communications are evaluated on the exam.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you, Tom. So written communication, they are scored looking for business communication. So it's not necessarily a measure of how correct you are on the content. You have to be on topic, of course, but the main focus is on your business writing. So making sure that there's a proper introduction, structure, and conclusion is where you would like to focus. And that's only in our BEC section. And to clarify my response before, we do not release questions from prior exams. We have that sample test out on the web to give an overview of some of our items, but it does not include all items from previously administered sections.
Yes. Where can the students find recently released AICPA questions?
We do not release questions. We do from time to time post them on our website. I think a year or two ago, we released certain questions. We do license questions to review course providers or tuition providers in the UK, as it's called. And they have some of those questions. So they're out there, but we do not, as practice, release all questions of previously administered exams.
Okay. Also, there is a popular question regards to the simulation that we all aware there are like 6 or 8 questions in one simulation. Let's say the student has answered 3 right out of the 6 and 3 are wrong. So how the simulation will be scored? Whether we will be given 0 for the whole sim or else partially scored for that?
It's the simulations are definitely not an all or nothing proposition. There's chances to earn individual points. You can get parts of it right, you can get parts of it wrong.
Okay. Thank you for answering. Thanks.
No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bhavya, I've just unmuted you. If you could go ahead.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
So my question is related to the MRAs. Can you throw some light on the MRAs between the AICPA and other countries, and especially with CPA Canada?
Yeah, our MRAs.
Joe, there's going to be there's slides coming on MRAs.
Ooh, thank you, Colleen. Appreciate that. Colleen will cover that.
Okay, fine. Sure.
That's my favorite answer so far.
Thank you. Joe, so my other question is, what are the requirements if someone want to open a CPA firm in India?
I do not have the answers to that. I do know that the US CPA is not intended to license folks in India.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Thomas, do we want to take any live questions? Because I've seen that you have kept there. You have marked some of the questions, Thomas, in the chat window, in the Q&A window. So do we?
Yes, we can if you'd like to. I left some live because they were asked multiple times. So I thought it would be good. And I know that it may be good for others to hear the answers as well.
Okay.
So you can bring them up to our panelists if you'd like, if you want to read them.
Yeah. So is US GAAP going to be completely replaced by IFRS? Is the question, Joe?
Absolutely not. I've commented on this before. There was for a little time, we tested differences between US GAAP and IFRS on the exam due to lack of convergence between the two. There does not appear to be that happening. So US GAAP will be the focus of the CPA exam.
Okay. One question is the Excel the same what it is being given by the review providers or the AICPA? Is that, I think I'm not so clear on the question. I think they're asking on the Excel functionality.
Yeah, it's a full version of Excel, so it should be very comparable to what's on your computer. It should be a seamless jump from what you have in front of you to what's on the exam.
Okay, how the credit can be measured in task-based simulations when few questions are wrong in simulation?
That was back to the question before. Can you get essentially partial credit in a task-based simulation? The answer is yes. You don't have to get it all right to receive credit. There's chances for you to earn partial credit or get half of the questions right in a task-based simulation. So it's not an all or nothing proposition.
And one question is on the 18 months window, because once they pass, the score is valid for 18 months. Is there a possibility that we can extend that, or that is the 18-month window is the strict timeline which is given for each and every score which they pass?
Yeah, the 18 months won't be changing. And when Colleen comes back on, she can add her thoughts to that too. But that is not changing right now or envisioned to change with CPA evolution that I mentioned.
Hey, Joe, I'll just go ahead and jump in on that.
Great.
Yeah, and remember, it is once you pass your first section, you have 18 months to pass the other 3. So we also do know, and keep your eye on it, on NASBA's website, depending on which jurisdiction, during this virus situation, depending on which jurisdiction, which state or territory you applied to, we have definitely been extending the 18 months. All the states did through the end of December of 20. Some have extended it a little further. So keep your eye on that. We have lists of all of the jurisdictions on our website if you're actually in process, and watch for that. Because notices to schedule and NTSs, there have been extensions of both, given some of the challenges with the virus, with the shutdowns of the test centers early on, and with some of the restrictions in travel and such. So keep your eye on our website for both NTS and credit extensions in the short term.
Thanks, Colin. So the next question is there any strategy to solve the simulation? So Joe, as we know, sims are the more tougher ones in AICPA. So what are some of the tips where they could do effectively or they can perform well in the simulations? Because there are various types of sims, like task-based simulation is one. We have the written communication sims. So they are looking for any kind of strategy where they could prepare well for the sims.
Yeah, I think the first step, going to our sample test, looking at the different types. As you mentioned, there's the task-based simulation, which is kind of the example that I showed, which has both numerical input and drop-down lists. There's the written communication, which requires you to create a professional business response. There's also research questions, and you can go and see the research questions there. That's where you're asked to go to the professional literature, say in financial accounting and reporting, the FAR section, you go to FASB codification and find the answer to the question and provide the citation. My biggest tip for task-based simulations, look at the instructions and make sure you're following the instructions and what it requires. That will really help, making sure you provide us with the information in the correct boxes.
Okay. And some of them have a confusion on the ethics exam. So once they pass the CPA exam, so they need to write an ethics exam in order to get the CPA license. So they are asking, what is so is it mandatory to write the ethics exam? And if yes, how do they prepare for it?
The ethics exam is dependent on what jurisdiction that you seek licensure in. And we have a few resources coming up on slides where we can point folks to look for the requirements and guides on preparation.
Okay. So I think one last question. So Akash, I'm unmuting you. Akash, please go ahead. I think we are not able to.
Yeah, so my question was the same for the ethics exam. So if it is mandatory to give the ethics exam, if yes, so how we can prepare for the same?
Okay.
Yep, and we have some slides coming up on that.
I think that's it. We have so the rest we can take it in the Q&A window, Joe.
So I'll go through briefly some of the candidate resources that we've talked about. Some of the sites are good for looking at especially the ethics question, what's required, and what you can do to prepare. So the AICPA and NASBA are on all the normal platforms here: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. That first one, AICPA.org/CPA exam, is where you can go for the blueprints, where you can go for the sample test. There's a screenshot there of AICPA.org. Again, it has the exam overviews, certain exam requirements. It has a white paper on how the exam is scored. It's a pretty quick read, and I'll give you a little bit of insight into how we score. I think it's pretty interesting. I suggest you take a look, and again, it's there. This Way to CPA is a great tool and can help with your questions on ethics, because it can break it down by the state or jurisdiction or territory that you're applying, what their ethics requirement is. Some have ethics requirements, some do not, and what they and how to prepare for that. So I would go to thiswaytocpa.com. You can see going left to right here, AICPA has a CPA exam candidate group. It has a lot of members, and it's exam news and updates straight from the AICPA. And then if you really want to go deep on the CPA exam, get a lot of information, you can check out our podcast, Next Stop CPA. We have episodes each month, and we have interviews with folks from the CPA exam staff, from NASBA, and it gives you kind of good insight and some tips on what you can do to help prepare for the exam. Colleen, I'll turn it to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Joe. So this slide is sharing with you some examples of emails that we send out. And we send these directly to candidates who are in the system and who are affected. And they can be targeted. So say something is happening specific to India, we would have sent an email to candidates in our system who have notices to schedule or who have applied for the examination. And we send those directly to you from NASBA. You can see some samples here, like score release timelines, what's up with the test centers when we had some disruption at test centers. And as I mentioned earlier, we had new protocols for checking in and how things would happen at test centers. We provided that directly to the candidates. So please know that you are, if you're in our system, you will be getting these emails. Say we're going to open in new international locations or things like that. So please watch for that. I would also encourage you, and Kyle, you can go to the next slide. There was something put into the chat by one of our representatives at AICPA who talked about a website. You've heard several mentions of CPA Evolution and what's happening with that, because the examination will be changing somewhat. It was mentioned, I think Joe mentioned earlier, we'll be going from a 4-section examination, still 4 sections, but everybody will have to take 3 core sections on audit, accounting, tax, with technology built in, and then they can choose one of 3 disciplines. So it's really great for those who want to focus maybe just in tax or just in financial accounting or maybe information systems or technology, that you have to be tested in a core, but then you choose one of 3 disciplines in which to be tested. Now, let me be really clear. This is not right now. This is an initiative we're working on, but that examination is set to, we plan to switch over to that new licensure model and new examination in January of 2024. January of 2024. So it's a ways off if you're thinking about it, but for those in the system now, you would just continue testing as normal. But there is a website, evolutionofcpa.org, that has lots of great information about that initiative if you want to learn more. So anyway, this is the NASBA website. We've already shown you that it's out there. I would also like to take a moment as we go into the next slide to make sure and that we're clear that you apply for the US CPA exam, you're given a license by a state or territory, and you choose the one, since you are not in the United States, the one that you want to apply through and get licensed in. But do know that that license is portable, meaning that we have what we call mobility in the United States. So if I'm licensed as a New York CPA, I can work in other states in the United States. And for most CPA firms in the United States, there is what we call mobility also. There's also a concept of reciprocity, not to get too deep here, but if I get licensed in one state, I then can transfer my license to another state if I meet certain criteria. So I wanted to explain that getting licensed, choosing which jurisdiction you're going to be licensed in is important, because you want to match your education and your experience and your background to the place that is most appropriate possibly for you. But it doesn't, but you are a US CPA. You're not a New York CPA. You're not a California CPA. You're a US CPA once you're licensed. So Somebody asked about mutual recognition agreements, and this is the slide where we were going to chat about that briefly. There is, we showed you the candidate bulletin earlier, and there's also a separate candidate bulletin for what's called IQEX, which is the International Qualification Examination. This is, we have mutual recognition agreements with certain professional organizations in certain countries, and they're all listed on our website. But briefly, the Canadian CPAs, CPA Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong Institute of CPAs, Ireland, Mexico, Scotland, and South Africa. And then you can go to our website for the specific professional organizations. And the concept is, I will use Canada as my example. If somebody is a Canadian CPA and they wish to become a US CPA, they can utilize this mutual recognition agreement to get there. And what they have to do in the United States is take this IQEX examination, which is the regulation section of the CPA examination. You would be tested on United States tax code and law and business law in the United States, and then meet certain other criteria. But it's not a substitute to become a US CPA if you're not already a professional accountant that is treated as equal or mutual through the MRAs. So we did want to share that, and you can go to NASBA's website, look at this candidate bulletin, which can provide that information to you. It is mutual, so a US CPA can become a Canadian CPA by meeting certain requirements that are not, don't include taking the entire Canadian CPA exam as an example too. So it's reciprocal. So we also have, just like Joe talked about with AICPA, NASBA also has Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram accounts, and we have many folks on all of those. If you want to go ahead and click again, Kyle, you can see the numbers of members we have that have signed up for each of those platforms. And I really encourage you to join these, because this is how we get information out, and we share information, and we do it quickly. So if you're not already an applicant and you're not already kind of in the system, this is how you're going to find out if something is changing in a country, or we're adding new countries, or we're talking about changes to the examination. These are the ways to do it through NASBA's and AICPA's social media accounts. So please do join, and it's easy to do and easy to follow. I know a number of you have. This is the number of members and comments and posts and reactions we've had on NASBA's CPA Exam Candidates Forum, which is a Facebook group. And I know a number of you are on it because I'm a member of it and I follow it, and I see the questions and I see the comments. I see the excitement when it's time for scores to be released, and everybody waiting and encouraging each other and congratulating each other when they find out they pass sections, but also getting a lot of tips about how to study. And it's just really encouraging. And I think you'll find if you join a forum like this Facebook forum for NASBA, that you'll find out a lot of great information. So let's speak briefly. I've talked about the fact that this is a license. It's not just an examination to take. To be called a US CPA, you need to get the license. And I know that some folks say, well, I don't know how, there's an experience requirement that is not, I would say it's not real tight. I mean, you can get your experience in a company or in a firm or otherwise. It's not that hard to get the experience because it has to be accounting related. But you do have to have it signed off on, and you have to have that experience signed off on. So I did want to let you know we have a service, and Kyle is going to chat briefly with you about that.
Thanks, Colleen. And we recognize that the experience part, it may be more difficult to have a licensed CPA sign off on your experience. And one of our goals is to make the CPA credential available to both domestic and international accounting professionals worldwide. So NASBA's one of our latest efforts is the experience verification service. So I'll go over some of the requirements in order to apply for the experience verification. Candidates have to pass the US CPA exam. You have to meet the specific jurisdiction's education requirements. And then you have to have the 1 or 2 years, depending on the jurisdiction, you have to have that work experience. If you have that, you can apply for the service. And what the experience verification service will do, we'll look at, do you have all that criteria? We'll check and make sure that your work experience is authentic. We'll check with your employer. We'll schedule a video conference with a licensed US CPA. And what that video conference will do, it'll be an interview conducted by that CPA, and it will review your work experience. And some applicants, if you apply for the service, maybe you obtained additional education after you pass the CPA exam. I think as we all know, some jurisdictions maybe they allow you to take the exam with 120, but when you go to get licensed, you will need to meet the 150. So if you are bridging the gap and taking additional education, maybe while you're taking the CPA exam or after you pass it, you can get an updated international evaluation report during this experience verification process. Let's go over the flow of experience verification. So you'll be in contact with NASBA. You can go to our website and find experience verification under licensing. We'll have a client manager guide you through the process. Like I said, they will look at your work experience. They'll contact your employer, and they will, make sure that you've obtained the appropriate hours and have the work that's needed. They will set you up with a licensed CPA so you can have that video conference, and they'll have that interview with the CPA. Once all that has taken place, we'll get the report back from the CPA. We'll include all of your experience. We'll put it into a report for the jurisdiction, and we'll send it directly to the jurisdiction where you're applying. Now, this is not something that all jurisdictions offer as an option. If you look at this chart, you'll see the US states or the jurisdictions that allow this service. So right now we have 10, and there is potential for more in the future. I can't really be certain on that, but this is where we're at right now. So if you applied to, let's say, Montana or Washington, New Hampshire, the experience verification option is viable for you if you need to go that route. So now we'll talk about continuing professional education, and I'll turn it back over to Colleen to go, to Joe to go over this.
Thanks, Kyle. So as Colleen mentioned, the CPA is a license, and CPE is required for CPAs to maintain your knowledge or improve knowledge or professional competence to perform quality professional services. So this is required. You usually have to report your hours around every 3 years. Generally, it's 120 hours over those 3 years. And as a CPA, you're responsible for complying with all of the CPE requirements for your state board or any other membership organizations that you're with. Again, it varies the amount and the type of hours that education hours that you get vary by jurisdiction. Going to that state board and learning about where you'll be licensed and those requirements is something that's really important once you get your CPA license. And CPE is offered by the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and other organizations. So they're readily available. A lot of the larger firms offer free continuing professional education. And talking about the AICPA, the AICPA develops and scores the exam, but of course we are a membership organization which looks out for the profession. And becoming a member has benefits. Those benefits include subscription to Journal of Accountancy, discounts on continuing professional education, discounts on conferences, discounts on publications, access to credentials. One of those is the Certified IT Professional. You can go out and Google that and see what that's all about. We do have two types of memberships that might interest folks on this call. We have a candidate membership, those actively testing, and we have student memberships. And those memberships have a lot of the same benefits as a regular member. So I suggest going to our website and checking out those types of memberships. Turn it back to you guys for some questions.
So Kyle, there is a question for you. So in our Chartered Accountancy of India, we have articleship. So will that articleship of CA, specifically I'm taking with respect to Chartered Accountancy itself. So we have a 3-year articleship requirement. So will that be considered as an experience under the NASBA Experience Verification Services for CPA license?
Well, and Sripal, I may not be able to give an exact answer on that, because what the experience verification does, it deals with your experience working for a company. So the articleship seems very similar to an internship.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think you would be considered a full-time employee of that company. I would have to do some research on that and talk to Patricia on that and get back to you. And I can follow up in an email to you on that one, Sripal.
Sure, guys.
I would ask, we do have Allison Harper on, and I don't know if she would have the answer to that one or not. If so, if she would unmute. She may not.
No, I'm here. Actually, that is a great question, and it all falls with what state, or I'm sorry, what jurisdictions will accept and what they won't accept. Example is there are some jurisdictions that will allow self-employment while others will not. So it would just be what the requirements are of what the board will actually accept.
Okay. So there are still certain state boards where the articleship experience might be considered as an experience, at least. Okay. Joe, one question comes up is, if one gets 2 research questions in exam, does both will be scored, or one is a part of practice or model which will not be scored?
You know, my general advice for thinking about questions that you think might be pretest or not, answer all questions to the best of your ability, because there's no guarantee that a question is a pretest question. They could both very well be scored. So I wouldn't worry about trying to figure out which one is scored or not scored. You know, you could get 2 research questions and they could both be scored. So always doing your best on the question presented is the best strategy.
Okay. So Thomas have marked certain questions which needs to be answered live. So what happens if the 18 months period expires and all the modules are not cleared in 18 months? Is it possible to register and write again?
You want to take that, Joe, or you want me to?
Oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it is. It's a rolling 18 months. So say you pass a section and your 18 months starts ticking, and you get 2 more of the sections passed in the 18 months, you only lose the 1 section that is outside of the 18-month window. So meaning if you, your 18 months then really starts with the last section that the most historic section that you last passed. So you need to, yes, you can retake a section if you need to, but hopefully you will plan accordingly and not procrastinate and work very hard to get the exam sections done in a timely manner on a very, kind of a regimented process of study and testing.
Thanks, Colin. Kyle, you have a question. Indian CA or ACCA are given credit toward the 150-hour requirement are equivalent to bachelor's degree, but they are not considered as degree granting bodies. On the other hand, 3 years degree like BCom from accredited university in India is considered as degree granting, but does not meet the 4-year requirement. How do I get around this?
So do you mind repeating the first part of that, Sripal?
I think he's telling that Indian CA, though they are given the credit, but they are not considered as a degree granting bodies. On the other 3-year degree like a BCom is considered as degree granting, but does not meet the 4-year requirement. So is there a workaround on that?
Exactly. And that is a unique scenario. And that's why it's not a blanket thrown over all jurisdictions, because it's not something that all jurisdictions would accept as far as the CA. However, looking at ICAI, they're not accredited by the UGC like you may see a lot of the universities. So that is a difference. It boils down to the BCom. It's a full-time 3-year program. So looking at it on a course-by-course basis, we're not giving it the 4-year bachelor equivalence. But if they have both credentials with the CA, the CA is adding to that, and we will add those credits on for certain jurisdictions. So, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to get around that. They can both potentially get credits and complement each other, and that's what we'll provide on our report. So I think there are states that you've seen and people have seen that if you have both, there's a very good chance you might have sufficient education to qualify.
Okay. Is there any feasibility to expand AICPA scholarship to international candidates too? Colin or Joe?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the scholarship process necessarily. We can get back to you on that.
Yeah. Okay, is there any email ID? I think we can take that up. Thomas, did you mark any further questions? Because I'm not finding it.
No, I think in general, there are a lot of questions of candidates and their requirements. And Kyle did a great job answering that last question. And I guess, Kyle, if you could just let everybody know what is the process if they're not sure of whether they have enough credits. There are people that have not been to college for 15 years, and will that still count, and things of that nature. But what is the process for any candidate to start getting evaluated by NASBA for this? I mean, many of them are not sure if they even come close. So why would they, I guess, apply and spend the time, effort, energy, and money to do so?
Definitely.
So I think there's a number of questions in the chat throughout the day. And if you could maybe go over that process, or maybe of what you've seen from candidates, and how you help them.
Sure. And so we do get education from candidates going back into the 80s or even 70s I've seen in the past. And as long as that university was accredited at that time, that is still a valid education that's going to count toward the education requirements. So if it's 10 years ago, 20, 30, that's okay. That can still count toward the requirements. And that's why they have the 3 or 4 E's, because you still have to pass the CPA examination and you still have to have the experience in order to obtain that license. As far as getting started with the process, I know a lot of the review course providers, such as Simandhar Education, they are helpful with guiding you. But we also have a service. There's a couple ways you can go. We have an undecided evaluation service where we equate your education to the US equivalents, and then we compare that with all jurisdiction requirements to try to find a match in order for you to get started with that process, and we can help guide you as well. You could also get the evaluation report for a specific state, and I know that the CPA Examination Services Department offers what they call an advisory evaluation, where you're not having to actually pay all the section fees for the CPA exam. You're not having to pay the exact first time application fee, but they can evaluate and determine your eligibility and give you an exact answer on if you meet the requirements, or if you do not, what are you missing, and send that to you so that you know if there's a gap. And that's called the advisory evaluation with the, you can get to it by CPA Central, and it's offered by the CPA Examination Services Department.
One question comes up, Kyle, is does NASBA accepts provisional certificate on exceptional basis if the university has not held convocation even after 2 years?
So we could be open to that. And that's something that could possibly come up on a case-to-case basis. We may need to get confirmation from the university on that to make sure that if we had a letter from the university, they haven't had a convocation, we could definitely accept a provisional certificate in that circumstance.
Colin, you have a question. Is there any retirement age in CPA? Heard from one review service providers that 50% CPAs are retiring. How is that possible in case of licenses profession?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Is there any retirement age in CPA?
Oh,
heard from one review service provider that 50% of the CPAs are retiring in US. And I think that's the logic of having a license of that 3-year rule, that they need to pass the exam and apply for a CPA license. Was that on the same logic, or how is that possible in case of licenses profession?
Yeah. So first of all, there's no hard retirement age for a US CPA. I will say some of the large multinational, the large international CPA firms, some of them have mandatory retirement age just as a firm policy. But there's no, and there are a lot of US CPAs still practicing into their 60s, 70s, and sometimes 80s and more. But I guess the question probably is coming up as a result to getting sign off on experience. And we've said, it depends on the state. It can be, if it has to be a supervising CPA, then it could be somebody, it doesn't have to be a partner. It could be a manager or a director in a firm, or somebody that has worked with you and can vouch for your experience. It doesn't have to be the most senior people within an organization to do that. So that does allow some latitude, and that's where it may be good to, as you're determining which state you want to apply through, to look at the rules about whether it requires a supervising CPA or just a US CPA to sign off. Something to be careful about if that's a situation in which you find yourself in, that your CPA is no longer licensed.
So there's a question like, so I think I'll just tweak that. So CPAs in India can still practice. If not, they can't sign the attestation services. They can still do if they are not Indian chartered accountants. So Colin, do they have that? Can they open the firm in India and still sign off the US companies sitting in India, or is the location mandatory to sign the financial statements?
No, the US CPA firms are not recognized as such in India. It's chartered accountants and chartered accountant firms that have to sign off on audit and attestation work. So, and we are not, there's no expectation of individuals opening US licensed CPA firms in India.
Okay. So if there is a US client, which is a subsidiary which is coming up, can they still sign the statements sitting in India, or it's not?
I do not know the answer to that. Where they're physically sitting versus where the work and what office it's being done out, I do not know, and I do not know the rules of the chartered accountant's profession in India to know what would be acceptable versus not. So I can't answer.
So guys, I think just for clarification, it's better to take always the approval from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and then try to do the practice or whatever the audit clients if you're getting it from outside India. I hope that clears. So Kyle, will US CMA carry any credits in evaluation purpose in near future, or is it still that US CMA will not be getting any credits?
Yeah, we do not plan to give academic equivalents of credits for a US CMA credential. So that would be a professional qualification, and it's also located based out of the US, even if you may take it from overseas. So that's something we're not giving equivalents on our reports.
Okay. Okay. So I think we are mostly done with all the questions. I hope. So one last question is, will AICPA accept ACCA qualification just like Indian Chartered Accountants, or ACCA also doesn't get any credits? Kyle?
That's correct. That's something that we're not currently awarding credits for that professional qualification as well. So you will not see it indicated on our reports.
Yeah. So Colin, one more question on the CPA license, sorry. I don't intend to involve in any attestation services and only do the review services. Do I still need the license, or I can skip the license?
It depends on where you are. Again, if that's, I hate to punt, but I do not know the rules of ICAI. So if you're in the United States and you're providing review services, virtually all states require you to be a licensed CPA, because it's still in the United States, it's still an attestation. It's under that umbrella of attestation services, but I do not know the rules of ICAI.
Like we have in ACCA, is there any portal from NASBA or AICPA where jobs are posted for CPAs and where we can meet the recruiters and the available vacancies?
Joe, I do know, and I don't mean to speak for AICPA, but I do believe that AICPA has a job open position kind of portal that can be joined. I don't know the specifics of it, but I believe AICPA has something along that lines.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, maybe the Association of Institute of.
Yeah, I believe it's on our website.
Yep.
Okay. So I think that's all we had, guys, from today for today. So any further queries or anything with respect to the specific evaluation services and all, please get in touch with the contact details and the email IDs which are given on the slide. So it was an amazing session, Joe, Colin, Kyle, and we just share the vote of, I think Sangeeta, please share the vote of thanks.
Thank you. We, the entire Simandhar family, once again like to thank you, AICPA and NASBA, for giving us this huge opportunity to host and sharing the valuable insight with us. And special thanks to our volunteers, Abhi, Radhika, Kritika, Akash, Bhavya, and Shanti. Thank you so much, guys. It was great having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, we are already available on the numbers which have been passed into the Q&A window. Thank you so much, AICPA team and NASBA team, for giving your time. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.